Hey everybody, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about the experimental procedures here, which is not the last, but the second to last category. But I want you to make sure you put this in as the final entry into your lab book because it'll make sense. It makes sense when you get there, when you get to do it in the lab. Okay, so you've done everything else. You've done a general procedure, chemical hazards and precautions, physical constants. You've done a data table. You've done a diagram. Now it's time for experimental procedures. Okay, so experimental procedures are fairly straightforward and similar to the data table, only in that you shouldn't write anything up before you get there. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to do 111, and I'm going to say experimental procedures. Now I'm going to go over to page 111, obviously, and 111, and I'm going to do lab 1, simple distillation, and then it's going to be experimental procedures. Now, many students ask, well, why are we doing experimental procedures when we have general procedures back over here? Okay, here's the really straightforward answer, is that general procedures are what you should do, and experimental procedures are what you actually do. Okay? And so when you get to lab, you're going to write down everything that you do right here, and you can make this a bulletized list. Okay? However you want to do it. All the way down to whatever. So this is going to be, and it can be as detailed as you would like. You know, at the very least, you're going to say get PPE, personal protective equipment. But if you want to say got lab coat, got gloves, got put on goggles, and then you said obtain glassware kit. You know, that's cool. And then constructed distillation apparatus. Okay. And then 50 milliliters of ethanol, 2 propanol mix was added to 250 milliliter round bottom flask, which we call the pot in this case. Okay, now I purposely got down here to step 4 because I think it's important to point out, as part of your experimental procedures, when you get into the lab, you want to make sure that you make observations of those chemicals, of those reactants, so that you know what you're dealing with. You know, maybe you record a smell, or maybe you record its appearance. Okay? That way you can refer back here and you can see what has changed from the beginning to the end. All observations go right into your experimental procedure. Okay? One of the big things in this lab is temperature. You know, so you may have a step that was temp, and then you're going to start at somewhere around room temperature, like 20, and then, you know, maybe after 1 minute, it went to 21.3 degrees Celsius. Another thing you're going to want to record in here as part of your experimental procedures is going to be the drip rate. And you don't have to necessarily count, although that would be awesome, but you know, you can say that it was slow, fast, medium. Actually, let me revise that. you should probably count at least a couple of times so that you have an idea of what slow, fast, or medium is. The next thing is that you can continue your experimental procedures on the next page. So you would just write this. This would be experimental procedures, and you would just write continued. Okay? And then you're going to do this and do that. Okay? And then when you get done with lab that day, you line, sign, date, done. Okay? And so now your experimental procedures are a reflection of what you've actually done, so that then when it comes time to writing it up, you can go to your experimental procedures section and compare it to your general procedures section, and you can see what was done differently, or what was done incorrectly, or maybe where the lab wasn't as explicit as it maybe needed to have been in order for you to get the correct results. Who knows? But there it is. That is why you need to do an experimental procedure as well.